Welcome to Paskvan Podcasts. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps this channel. Okay, so let's get into this. We are turning our headlights onto a stretch of pavement that really, on the surface, should be one of the most unremarkable places you could imagine.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about Bray Road. It kind of skirts the quiet agricultural outskirts of Elkhorn, Wisconsin.
Right.
If you were driving there during the day, I mean, what would you see? Functioning farms, fields of corn and soybean, old farmhouses set way back from the road, nothing.
Just rural America.
Exactly. But then the sun goes down, and that entire environment, it just becomes defined by, well, absolute darkness and silence.
A total sensory shift.
And this quiet, unremarkable location has somehow become the epicenter of this regional mystery that has now spanned decades. We're talking about the repeated sightings of what locals have very reluctantly come to call the Beast of Bray Road.
Reluctantly is the key word there.
Our mission today is to do a real analysis of a stack of sources we've got here. We have journalistic investigations, compiled eyewitness accounts, and collected field notes from the people who first tried to put some kind of documented framework around this whole thing.
Right.
We need to pull out the key, consistent details that make this presence so hard to just dismiss as folklore or a trick of the light.
Or simple misidentification, which is always the first go-to.
Of course. We're trying to go beyond just the simple monster stories here to really explore why ordinary, reliable people were so profoundly unsettled by what they saw, something that repeatedly stepped out of the darkness and into their headlights, forcing them to question everything they thought they knew about the natural world.
Well, and what gives this particular case so much weight, its enduring quality, is the way it all came together. As you said, it wasn't one big dramatic event that was immediately sensationalized. It was this slow, almost organic accumulation of reports over years, starting back in the late 1980s. And each witness, was often completely unaware that other people had seen the exact same thing.
They were isolated incidents at first.
Completely. And the sheer consistency of the specific details reported by totally unrelated independent witnesses, sometimes separated by years, by miles, that's the critical element here. That level of repetition is what starts to challenge the easy psychological explanations, or, the standard biological ones. But before we even get to the creature itself, I think we have to look at the landscape and the observers.
The people who live there.
Exactly. Because the people who live there are experts in their own environment.
Okay, so this is where the context becomes so crucial, right? We have to establish the geography and the culture because that really sets the stage for how we judge the credibility of all these reports you've provided.
It's everything.
Bray Road is, it is the definition of rural normalcy. It's narrow, it's paved, but totally unlit, surrounded by farmland and these thick patches of woods. It's a place of function.
Utility.
Yes, utility over everything, not a place of fantasy.
And that functionality is the absolute key to local credibility. We are not talking about, casual visitors or tourists who don't know the local ecosystem.
No.
The people in this area, the farmers, mechanics, hunters, even local law enforcement, they are intimate with local wildlife.
They know it inside and out.
They can tell you the difference between coyote scat and dog scat from 20 feet away. They know how a deer reacts to a sudden noise versus how a bear might behave. Their entire lives are spent, in a way, reading the woods and the fields.
So when one of them says, I saw something I can't explain,
it means something. For instance, a local hunter doesn't just know that bears exist in the area. They know the specific gait of a black bear when it's just ambling along. They know the difference in the size and the depth of a track left by a large dog versus a young black bear. They know the height, the posture of a deer in the dark.
It's baked into them.
It is. That depth of practical, lifelong knowledge means that when one of them reports seeing something unexplainable, it just carries so much more weight. It's not that they're prone to hysteria. It's that their entire lifetime of experience has failed to categorize what they just observed.
And this geographical setting, this isolation, it also kind of ties into the quiet cultural history of the area. Even before these modern sightings kicked off, the region held this quiet folklore, didn't it? Tied to the German and Scandinavian immigrants who settled Wisconsin.
That is vital context. And these weren't, big campfire ghost stories. They were quiet family tales, sometimes told with a bit of a chuckle, but never really forgotten. These tales included all those European traditions of forest spirits, of shapeshifters, and particularly these large wolf-like creatures. The Waldgeister, or similar primal beings that were said to guard the deep woods, They just sort of lingered in family histories, in half-joking remarks about what's out there in the brush.
So there was a kind of latent cultural framework almost, an acceptance that the boundaries between the known managed farmlands and the wild ancient woods might be a little bit porous in this part of the country.
It provided a lens, maybe?
Yeah.
A way to interpret what came next.
Because initially, when the modern reports started to surface in the late 80s, they were easy to dismiss, weren't they? A driver would just see something large at the side of the road in the pitch black.
And they think, oh, headlight distortion,
Right.
or maybe a big stray mastiff.
Right.
The road was just background noise until the frequency and, more importantly, the specificity of the reports forced the issue. It provided that initial seed of doubt that then grew into this full-blown mystery.
And that darkness on Bray Road, I mean, it's total. It's like a sensory deprivation chamber, punctuated only by the sound of your engine and the twin beams of your headlights.
It's the perfect stage for the mind to play tricks on you, yes.
But it's also an environment where those few points of light intensely scrutinize the immediate area. So if something is illuminated, it's seen with this sharp, immediate intensity.
And the fact that the first witnesses wanted so desperately to accept the conventional explanations, a bear, a big dog, that shows how grounded in reality they were. They were actively resisting the impossible.
They didn't want it to be what it looked like.
Exactly. And that resistance is precisely why the next stage of these reports is so important.
Yeah.
They were forced out of that comfort zone because of one single defining detail: its posture.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. This is the point where the ambiguity really just vanished and dread took over. The turning point from just a large animal sighting to something impossible. It came not just from the size, but the specific way the figure carried itself. So many of the initial witnesses, professional drivers, farmers, they made that classic first mistake. They thought they'd spotted a bear standing up, maybe looking around at the edge of a field.
Which is the rational filter trying to impose order.
Yeah.
Bears, especially the black bears common to Wisconsin, they do stand on their hind legs.
Right.
But the key is that a bear does this awkwardly. They're built for 4 legs. When they stand up, it's usually brief. They lean back a bit. They might sway. They use it for height or dominance, but not for sustained movement. It's a shuffle, really.
But that's not what they saw. As the witnesses got closer, the figure didn't drop back to all fours.
It stayed up.
It just maintained the posture. And witnesses often had time to slow down or even stop their car, and the creature just remained vertical.
And this is the revelation that just shattered the bear hypothesis completely. It stood up fully, but critically, witnesses reported it did so without struggling, without balancing awkwardly.
It was natural.
Its musculature, particularly massive shoulders and the thick chest, it all suggested power that was built for sustained vertical movement. This wasn't an animal struggling to use a posture evolution never intended for it. It was completely natural.
And we are talking about consistent descriptions here. They placed this creature well over 6 feet tall, taller than most men, with some estimates pushing closer to 7, even 8 feet.
Huge.
It had this broad barrel chest, thick arms that hung low, almost down to its knees, and these powerful developed legs. And the entire body was covered in dark, sometimes matted-looking fur or hair.
The comparison that often comes up is if you superimpose the muscles of a very large great ape onto a canine frame, that might start to approximate what they saw. It suggests a spinal structure that's capable of efficiently bearing weight vertically, completely unlike a bear or a wolf. When it moved with a confident, effortless stride.
Then there's the head. It was distinctly canine. A pronounced snout, pointed upright ears. But here's the cognitive disconnect for the witnesses. The eyes. They didn't just passively reflect the headlights back like a startled deer or a raccoon.
No.
Witnesses consistently described the eyes reflecting the light in this sharp amber or yellow glow that felt deliberate, as if it was analyzing the source of the light, analyzing the vehicle itself.
And that combination, a distinctly wolf-like or canine head on a 7 to 8 foot bipedal frame, that's what defies all known North American fauna. It instantly rules out the entire category of known wildlife in Wisconsin.
Right.
Witnesses saw it walking across the road in these long, smooth strides, or stepping calmly into the tree line without breaking its pace. The smoothness of that transition, the lack of any struggle to maintain its balance, that is the defining behavioral detail that moves this out of the realm of misidentification.
And initially, the local authorities, the sheriff's department, they tried to stick to those conventional explanations. It had to be a bear with a strange coat. It had to be an unusually large dog. Or the one everyone dreads, the costume theory.
Of course, the man in a suit,
But the more reports that came in, especially from highly credible, sober individuals, the more those dismissals just started to unravel.
Well, and you have to appreciate the psychological position of these witnesses.
Yeah.
They were trying to accept the rational way out, because nobody wants to admit they saw a myth walk across the road in front of their car.
Absolutely not.
The initial skepticism was internally applied first, and yet the consistency of the independent testimony, all of them describing the same posture, the same height, the same canine features, it eventually forced the community to acknowledge that they were dealing with a consistent, shared unknown. This was a pattern that built up its own credibility over time.
So the creature's appearance was consistent, but its behavior is what truly separates it from any normal wildlife. The sightings didn't just happen once, they increased and they persisted, and they all clustered around that same few-mile stretch of Bray Road.
Right.
And this leads us to a really critical analysis of its behavior, what we're calling the pattern of awareness.
That localization is a very strong indication of territoriality. The encounters clustered, which suggests this presence, or maybe a small group of them, was patrolling or using a specific stretch of woodland and the adjacent farmland.
It had a home range.
It seems so. And this consistent geography meant that very quietly the local community began to adapt. They started driving faster through that section, or they'd take longer routes to avoid it late at night. They were acting on shared but unspoken knowledge.
And beyond just the roadside encounters, the sources detail these reports of strange damage near farmhouses, which suggests proximity and strength. But the damage wasn't the chaotic mess you'd associate with, say, a bear tearing open a trash can.
No, not at all. The descriptions indicate a strange intentionality. We hear reports of gates that were found unlatched or even moved, fencing deliberately disturbed, pushed aside. Heavy objects like filled water barrels or pieces of farm equipment shifted in ways that suggested just tremendous focused strength.
This isn't disorganized destruction.
It's not. It's not instinctive foraging. Moving a gate requires a decision. It requires manipulation. It suggests an awareness of human infrastructure and maybe even a deliberate testing of boundaries.
And the testimony from hunters and experienced outdoorsmen is, for me, maybe the most chilling part of the source material. These are people who know the sounds of the woods, and they reported feeling distinctly followed or paced through woods near Bray Road that they knew like the back of their hand.
This just speaks volumes about its stealth and its cognitive ability. The accounts are often incredibly precise. The hunter would stop, listen intently, and the sound of footsteps, a heavy bipedal tread matching their own from just inside the tree line, would stop immediately.
The second they stopped.
The second they stopped. When the hunter started moving again, the sound resumed, maintaining a perfect parallel track. This is not some animal accidentally wandering along. This is calculated movement. This is observation.
One report describes a hunter pausing because he heard breathing that was too deep and too rhythmic to be any known animal he had ever encountered in the North American woods.
Chilling.
Another one only caught a brief glimpse of something exceptionally tall moving parallel to him through dense brush that should have slowed any animal down to a crawl, and yet this figure moved quickly and smoothly. The immediate reaction of these experienced men abandoned the trip and retreat. The dread was instantaneous and absolute.
The stark contrast between this creature and normal wildlife behavior is just essential here. Animals run when they're startled by headlights. They bolt when an engine approaches. They prioritize flight.
Always.
This creature, by many accounts, often just lingered. It watched. It held its ground. It exhibited none of the typical panic-driven flight responses you would expect from a wild animal that's encountering a threat.
And that focused stare you mentioned earlier, that becomes the centerpiece of the interaction. Witnesses consistently recounted the creature turning its head and looking directly at them.
And this wasn't a vacant, instinctual animal stare.
No, it was described as focused, deliberate, and assessing. It was assessing the observer. It held that gaze, suggesting not only situational awareness, but a decision-making process. It was choosing to engage with the presence of the human.
So if you're encountering a large predator, you expect it to behave according to its predatory instinct or its fear. This creature just broke both of those molds. It stayed put, which suggests confidence, and it observed, which suggests cognition.
And then there's the truly profound and disturbing anecdote that pushes this mystery into the realm of the humanoid. Several sources mention an account where a driver reported slowing down near the creature, and the figure responded by raising an arm.
Oh, yeah?
As if it was shielding its eyes from the intensity of the headlights.
That gesture is the ultimate behavioral marker. It's problem solving. It's, I am blinded by this light. I will use my articulated limb to mitigate the visual disturbance.
It's a human-like response.
It crosses a psychological threshold. It's no longer just a large, strange animal. It's an entity that appears to recognize and react to external stimuli using a cognitive response we associate with ourselves. It just blurs the line between animal and something more in a deeply, deeply uncomfortable way for the witness.
So by the early 1990s, the pattern was just too consistent to ignore, and the witness base had expanded drastically. Crucially, the sources weren't just teenagers telling spooky stories anymore.
Not at all.
The reports started including people with strong, established credibility, local professionals, factory workers, parents driving home from late shifts, and most significantly, there were whispers involving law enforcement officers.
And that reliability factor just dramatically increased the gravity of the whole phenomenon. These were reluctant witnesses. They had reputations to uphold. They had everything to lose by coming forward with what sounds like an absurd story.
Right.
They often only confessed their experiences after realizing their neighbors or, their colleagues had seen the exact same thing. And this independent corroboration, detailing the same height, posture, and canine features without any prior communication between them, that provides the factual bedrock of the entire Bray Road phenomena.
The encounter pattern itself seemed almost ritualistic. Most of the sightings happened late at night, generally between 10 p.m. and the early morning hours, when the roads were completely deserted.
Prime time.
The creature would often step into the roadway, forcing drivers to slam on their brakes, or it would cross in these long, deliberate strides, never appearing hurried or panicked. It was the creature that dictated the terms of the interaction. It chose when and how it would be seen.
Let's dig into some of the specific physical details that continued to unsettle people when they got a clear, even if it was brief, view in the headlights. Beyond the sheer height and that intimidating canine head, witnesses were incredibly consistent about the musculature. A heavy, sloping torso, thick arms that hung low, often described as being able to touch its knees when it was standing, and these powerful, almost inverted plantigrade legs that suggested real stability.
And the eyes, again. Caught in the headlights, they consistently glowed yellow or amber, which, that's often associated with reflective tissue in nocturnal animals.
The tapetum lucidum.
Right, but combined with that focused stare, it gave the impression of active malice or high-level observation rather than simple animal startlement.
But the detail that truly presents an anatomical challenge to any known classification is the description of the forelimbs.
The hands.
The hands. Several credible witnesses described hands, not paws.
Yeah.
Muscular, clawed, yes, but articulated in a way that suggested long fingers and a potential grasping ability. This is the ultimate blurring of categories.
It is.
A wolf-like head on a 7-foot frame, moving bipedally, with hands capable of manipulation. That suggests a level of dexterity that is utterly foreign to the canine or the ursine world.
So law enforcement, locally, they found themselves in an impossible position.
Completely.
Officially, they had to be cautious, logging calls, investigating tracks when they were available, and publicly suggesting wildlife explanations. But quietly, and through anonymous leaks, rumors circulated that certain deputies had seen the creature themselves.
Something large, upright.
And not matching any official wildlife profile. The unofficial advisory to residents to drive faster through that area after dark just speaks volumes about the department's internal awareness of the mystery.
So this quiet local mystery needed a bridge to documentation. And that bridge was Linda Godfrey.
A local newspaper reporter.
Yes, who approached the story initially with just journalistic skepticism. She was intending to write a short, maybe quirky human interest piece on local paranoia, but her methodical approach changed everything.
Her genius was her non-sensational, systematic inquiry. She didn't seek out monster hunters. She sought out farmers and teachers and professionals. She didn't rely on phone tips. She drove to their homes, took detailed statements, and cross-referenced all the timelines.
She was looking for inconsistencies. She was searching for signs of hoaxes or shared narratives that could be explained by local gossip. But instead, she found a series of entirely independent, geographically separated accounts that aligned almost perfectly in every critical detail.
Height, posture.
Height, specific posture, movement, features. She brought structure to what had been just quiet, fearful whispers. She started mapping the cluster points and documenting the professional backgrounds of the witnesses. And this rigorous documentation is what established Bray Road as one of the most well-documented cryptid cases in modern history.
Her approach legitimized the witnesses. It encouraged more people to come forward who were probably relieved to know they weren't suffering from hallucinations or isolated incidents. But despite the documentation, the core emotional response remained the same.
Oh, yeah.
Witnesses were profoundly shaken, often describing their lingering distress years later.
And the fear was deeper than just a simple animal phobia. It was existential dread. The sudden, stark realization that something existed in their familiar, controlled Wisconsin environment that violated the fundamental rules of biology and reality that they held. This distress, this struggle to reconcile the image with what they knew to be possible, is what gives the reports their lasting sincerity and undeniable weight. The emotional integrity of the witnesses is the strongest form of soft evidence we have.
So we have this large volume of independent, consistent testimony from credible sources. Now we have to perform the most critical step of this analysis, systematically examining why every conventional explanation just fails to account for the core details. Let's start with the most obvious one. Dismissal number 1. Misidentified known wildlife.
Right, and this is where we need to apply some strict anatomical scrutiny. The easy answer, oh, that must have been a bear. That just falls apart the moment you consider the movement.
Yeah.
Bears are built for quadrupedal motion. They can stand, yes, but they're top-heavy. Their spine is ill-suited to a sustained bipedal load, and they wobble. The witnesses consistently described confident, effortless bipedal motion sustained for the whole encounter, sometimes while walking across the entire width of the road.
And the head and arm structure don't match. A bear's snout is short, its ears are rounded, its forelimbs, while powerful, they lack that long, almost articulated appearance described by witnesses who mentioned hands.
And the wolf theory is even less tenable. I mean, wolves and coyotes are built for speed and endurance on 4 legs. They just lack the necessary broad muscular shoulders, the skeletal structure, the hip arrangement to stand upright for more than a brief, painful moment, let alone walk with a strong, deliberate stride.
So the reports detail a creature that seems to have evolved for bipedal movement.
Exactly. Not a creature forcing a posture against its own anatomy.
Okay, so if it's not known wildlife, the next immediate challenge is dismissal number 2. Psychological explanations. Mass suggestion or collective hysteria.
And this is the common skeptic's retort in pretty much any high-profile cryptid case. The idea is that once the media reports start, people start interpreting every shadow or strange dog as the beast.
Right.
However, the timeline of the Bray Road reports, it really resists this theory. Crucially, many of the most detailed sightings happened before the story gained any widespread regional and national coverage. The consistency of the height, the bipedal posture, the canine head, all of that came from independent witnesses who often had not spoken to each other or even heard the emerging lore.
And on top of that, we're talking about experienced professionals. Hysteria often affects groups or people who are prone to suggestion. The Bray Road witnesses include law enforcement and seasoned hunters, people whose livelihood and safety depend on accurate situational awareness.
It's very difficult to argue that they all independently suffered a shared hallucination or spontaneously misinterpreted a shadow in exactly the same way.
So if conventional biology and psychology fail, we have to move into the cryptid category and start exploring the parallels. The physical descriptions align remarkably well with historical narratives, specifically the werewolf folklore that was brought over by those European immigrants.
It's compelling, isn't it? The old European traditions of tall, highly muscular, upright, wolf-like beings that retreat into deep forests. The modern description from Wisconsin, bipedal, powerful, with distinct canine features, it strikingly resembles these figures of old. It suggests that perhaps the modern experience is just a recurring manifestation of a presence that's been interpreted through folklore for centuries.
And in a more modern context, Bray Road is probably the most famous convergence point for the broader Midwest dogman legend.
Absolutely. This is a regional cryptid tradition that's been reported across a huge swath of the Midwest, Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, and into Wisconsin. And the descriptions are virtually identical across state lines. A tall, bipedal canine, sometimes with glowing eyes, consistently seen near farmland and rural roads.
We should pause there and just stress how significant that regional connection is. Michigan, for example, has its own robust history of dogman sightings, sometimes predating the Bray Road events, but always echoing the same characteristics.
The height, the aggressive, confident stride, the reluctance to flee.
Yes. Bray Road essentially took this regional story and provided the most detailed, documented framework for it. It gave the legend a modern prominence it never had before.
Now let's address the undiscovered species theory. The idea that this is a rare, large, highly elusive mammal, maybe a type of primate or some evolutionary anomaly that is just incredibly adept at avoiding humans.
Plausible on the surface?
The creature's nocturnal habits, its avoidance behavior, its deliberate retreat when it's observed, that all seems to support the idea of a highly intelligent, elusive animal.
That sounds reasonable until you introduce the counter-argument that skeptics always rely on, the lack of hard, undeniable physical evidence. A population of 7-foot bipedal creatures, even a rare one, should leave something behind over decades.
Where are the bones?
Where's the roadkill? Why is there no clear, unambiguous photograph or video?
And that is the central logical weakness of the cryptid case. If something is physically present, it has to interact with the ecosystem, and it has to decay, and it has to leave traces. But the proponents of the undiscovered species theory have a strong counter argument.
Which is?
The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially for something highly elusive, nocturnal, and potentially highly intelligent, operating in environments that are notoriously difficult to track in. Dense Wisconsin woods, vast cornfields, swamps. These are excellent places for an intelligent animal to remain hidden.
But regardless of the biological categorization, the biggest obstacle for all conventional theories, psychological or biological, is what we dub the intentionality problem. The behavior is the key.
Precisely. This creature is not behaving like an instinctive animal. It observes, it moves deliberately, it retreats rather than panics or confronts most of the time. Its lack of a flight response and its sense of decision-making, that moment it raises a hand against the headlight glare, those are cognitive markers.
It chooses when to be seen and when to disappear. Witnesses look into those glowing amber eyes and they report seeing intelligence, not just instinct. This entity occupies that unsettling middle ground. It has the form of a wild beast, but the perceived awareness of something more. And that awareness prevents us from simply cataloging it as rare wildlife. And the Beast of Bray Road didn't just vanish when the national media attention faded in the mid-90s. The phenomenon persisted into the 2000s and beyond, which is a powerful refutation of that media hysteria hypothesis.
Absolutely.
The creature never became more sensationalized. Its core behavior remained restrained, watching, crossing a road, calmly disappearing.
The reports just continued, quieter now, often shared through private networks rather than tabloid headlines. People still describe that tall, upright canine figure. Farmers still spoke of the strange movement along their fence lines late at night. The consistency of the post-fame reports, sticking to the same height, the controlled movement, the unnerving presence, it just defies the idea that this was purely a fad that should have died out once the cameras left.
And Bray Road itself, it underwent a kind of cultural transformation. It wasn't just a local spooky story anymore. It became ground zero, the defining case study for the broader Midwest dogman legend.
And the rise of new media profoundly reinforced this. Online communities, podcasts like this one, web forums, they allowed experiences to be shared and compared across state lines in ways that just weren't possible in the 1980s.
Right.
Someone in northern Michigan could read Godfrey's documentation and realize that the 7-foot bipedal canine they saw near their deer stand matched the description from Elkhorn perfectly. This sharing deepened the case study, revealing a large regional pattern of sightings that had previously existed only as isolated whispers.
And so, here we are, stuck in this perpetual stalemate. The debate endures because skeptics, using conventional scientific methodology, cannot fully explain the sheer volume and consistency of these credible, independent witnesses. They can easily explain away an individual sighting, but not the multi-decade pattern.
And conversely, those who accept the physical reality of the phenomenon, they lack the one thing the scientific community demands: conclusive physical proof. No body, no verified tracks, no clear, unassailable photography.
So the Beast of Bray Road occupies this narrow, frustrating space.
It does. It resists logical dismissal because the testimony is so unified and sincere, but it resists formal acceptance because the physical evidence is so elusive.
And the environment itself returns as the ultimate contextual factor in the stalemate. Rural settings heighten awareness, yes, but they also create observers who are deeply, intimately familiar with their surroundings. So when something stands out in that environment, it stands out sharply, because the locals know precisely what belongs there and what doesn't. The refusal of this mystery to fade is a testament to the credibility of those local observers.
And that refusal speaks to the power of the beast's calm, deliberate behavior. Legends usually grow more elaborate and exaggerated over time. The creature's description, however, has remained remarkably grounded and consistent. It never morphed into a more flamboyant monster. It simply remains, observed occasionally, always calm, always deliberate, occupying that interstitial space between the farm fields and the wild woods.
So we've broken down the core elements of the Bray Road phenomenon. We have the profound consistency of this 6 to 8 foot upright canine figure, the intentional, non-animal behavior, and the systematic failure of all conventional explanations, whether that's misidentification, hysteria, or known wildlife to account for the detailed reports. The real lesson here for you listening isn't just about the creature itself. It's about the nature of human certainty when it's faced with repeated, unexplained phenomena. It's about that unnerving moment when established reality breaks down and you realize your map of the world might be incomplete.
The persistence of the Beast of Bray Road suggests that folklore and reality are not necessarily opposites, but maybe they're just intertwined layers of interpretation. The legends we carry from our histories might simply be a cultural lens through which people interpret something that is physically present, but just poorly understood by modern science. For those who still drive that quiet, dark road late at night, the question remains, is that lingering sense of being watched a creature, a myth, or merely a reminder that some things are real long before they are ever officially accepted?